Hello and welcome to Rays of Hope, brought to you by the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. I'm your host today, Mary Foley, and we have an exciting program in store for you today. You have gotten an opportunity to know the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center in many different ways, but today I'd like to talk to you about a change and what that change means for this community. And we have some very special guests with us today to help me do that. So welcome to Bridget Maxie from the Department of Community-Based Services and Lori Brown, the Clinical Director of the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as you know, and we're going to let the viewer in on a very exciting thing that we've got going on at the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center, and that is that we have recently been named by the Cabinet of Health and Family Services this region's designated Child Advocacy Center, and that's new for us. And so, Lori, I'd like to go to you first, just to give us a brief overview, to give the viewer an overview. What is a Children's Advocacy Center, and why is that important for us?
Well, Mary, as you know, we've been the Rape Crisis Center for this region for over 20 years, and we were already providing a lot of services to children and families in this region. And we are expanding the programs that we already had in place through prevention and education, as well as advocacy in our clinical program. But we're adding some additional services as the Child Advocacy Center, such as forensic services, which includes forensic interviews when a child discloses abuse, makes a report of abuse. And the purpose of that is so that the child will only have to be interviewed, hopefully one time in one place that they become friendly and comfortable with.
I see.
At the Child Advocacy Center, we can provide an array of services, as well as invite other professionals who are working with those cases in. So again, that child becomes comfortable in that environment. And we're also offering something new, which is specialized child sexual abuse exams, when that's warranted in a case of child sexual abuse.
Why are those exams important?
Well, one, those exams can help to make sure that a child is healthy, and also to use, if it's helpful in the investigative process, to use that information that's collected as part of that investigation. And those are provided by very well-trained, educated, and experienced physicians in the community.
And I think that you hit on an excellent point that I want to reiterate, and that's that we've been providing services to children for years in terms of therapy and intervening on their behalf once this crime has been brought to our attention or the detention of the appropriate authorities. And so we have come in as a support system on the clinical end, but now we're kind of expanding that arm to include a very direct relationship with the Department of Community-Based Services. And Bridget, I'd like to bring you in at this time. This is our first time in this role to support children in this way. And so could you help maybe some viewers maybe become more acquainted with the scope of the problem of abuse? Some of them might be thinking, I know that it happens, but is it really that big of a problem in our county? And what would you say to that?
Abuse in McCracken County is a larger issue than the public would think. If you don't deal with abuse daily, you don't have a good understanding of how much abuse there is. I mean, I'd say generally we investigate in McCracken County about 70 to 100 reports of child abuse a month.
Wow.
So there is a lot of abuse in McCracken County, and there are a lot of children that need our help.
And so in terms of how you interact with us now as a Child Advocacy Center, both of you together, give us an overview of why is it important that children have a specialized center such as a Child Advocacy Center. Why is that important in the entire process from beginning to end?
These are the most difficult cases to prosecute. I think anyone who works with child abuse cases would agree with that. And so I think from the very beginning, one, we want to make sure that the children are getting the services that they need, because it is so critical. Early intervention makes such a big difference for these children and their families, and we want to make sure they're getting the services and the support that they need. And then also, again, because of the difficulty in prosecuting these cases, we want to make sure that professionals are coming together and working together from across the disciplines in the most effective way to ensure the most successful prosecution of these cases.
And Bridget, you've been doing this for a very long time. How long have you been working with children? And then I'll get to the second part of my question.
About 10 and a half years.
So 10 and a half years you've been working in this role, and Lori as well, over a decade. So between the both of you, we've got 20 years experience in working with this crime. So from your perspective, when children go through something like a Child Advocacy Center, how does that help?
Well, it helps in all aspects, and as Lori said, early intervention is the key. we can work together and do have a central location to do interviews and to do follow-up therapy services for the children, so that they become familiar with one place, and it becomes easier for them and more comfortable for them to work through their issues of abuse and eventually get over those and become a productive citizen and just
able to resolve
Right.
those issues that come along with this sort of situation. So
Right.
we've given the what. We are now the regions, or the designated Child Advocacy Center for the 8-county purchase area. We've been given that title by the state and that charge and those responsibilities. And so the what, I guess, looks like that it is a central place where we work on behalf of children. We facilitate interviews, we facilitate medical exams, we provide therapy, we support the family, we work with law enforcement, we work with DCBS to make sure that those cases are prosecuted if that's how that ends up, coming about. The why is because it's important. The scope of the problem is huge, as you say. So I guess my next thought would be, if I'm a viewer and I'm watching and I think, okay, I see that this is a problem, I have no idea what I would expect if I were to try to report something like this. Could you talk to the viewer a little bit about how do they report, when do they report, and who is responsible to do so?
Sure. Basically, anybody and anyone that is suspects any type of abuse or neglect of a child or even an adult can just simply call our office and make a report. You can make a report anonymously if you're not comfortable leaving your name and contact information. There's also an 800 hotline number that's always accessible at all times. If it is after 4:30 or an emergency that you feel needs immediate attention, you just contact law enforcement. They immediately respond, and if they need a social worker, they call us. We're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow. And so I'm sure Lori and you have probably heard some of the misconceptions that go along that whole process. What happens if I do that, and then what's going to happen? Can you just step us through what does happen when that report is made?
Probably the largest misconception is that our agency is we just come and take your children, and that is a huge misconception. By statute, we're mandated to work with families and to try to keep families together, and as long as it can be done safely. What you can expect when you report is that a social worker the first thing we do is interview the children. We try to do that at a safe location away from the parents to get the best information possible. And the next thing we do would be to actually interview any collaterals or anyone that might have any information about the situation. Then we would interview the non-offending parent first if possible, and then the alleged perpetrator or the offending parent last. And that process is done to try to ascertain the most information and get the best evidence or best information that we can prove or disprove that the allegations have occurred.
I see. And so I think you hit on a very important point, and that is that your main motive is to keep the family together as long as it can be done safely and to protect the child.
Right. Our main goal is basically to assess for problem areas and needs for the families and children, and to plug in services or resources to address those identified needs to help the families and to help the children.
And again, I think one of the things that's most exciting for us is being able to get in very early in these cases now. We were, working with children, as I said earlier, on a large capacity, but now I think, are more involved in, as soon as the case comes up, we're more involved in that. And like Bridget said, we're a member of a multidisciplinary team, along with social service as well as some of the other professionals, the prosecutors and the law enforcement that are involved in these cases. And one of the things that we do initially is assess what are the needs of these children and try to make sure that they're getting all of the services and the support that they need initially. So to be a part of that is very exciting for us.
Yes, and it sounds like, I guess maybe a very basic way to describe it is when parents plug into social services or plug into law enforcement or plug into the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center, they're plugging into a network of people that are there to support and to help that process.
Exactly, and the professionals are able to share resources and information, which again makes, I think, the prosecution of those cases more successful, but ultimately it makes that family and that child, more accessible to what they need.
And from your perspective, Lori, why is intervention after abuse important? Why can't we just talk about it and go on?
Right. Mary, it's not just important, it's necessary. A child who's been through any type of trauma absolutely need services, as well as that family. Trauma is a very pervasive, long-lasting effects on the child and that family. It affects every area of their life, their emotional, their behavioral, their social, development. And again, it has long-lasting effects for them on the rest of their life. They're at increased risk for developing, all different kinds of problems, mental health, physical health. And so the earlier we can intervene and help that child to prevail, to increase their protective factors and help them to learn how to cope with what they've been through, then the better off they're going to be. And working with those parents in those cases too. When we're working with a child as a therapist, we're also working with that parent. That parent is going to be there for that child for the rest of their life, and we want to make sure that we've helped them build the skills that they need to help support their child and help their child heal and recover.
So you are describing an approach that pulls the parent in almost as that immediate therapist or support
Absolutely.
system for the child. So do you train parents then how to cope with it themselves and then teach their child to cope?
We do. It's absolutely, again, I think necessary for us to work with that parent to help them become the therapeutic agent for their child. We will work for short term with that child, but again, they're going to be there with it as a major part of that child for the rest of their life, and we want to make sure that they understand the effects of what the child has been through so they're able to give that child what they need, as well as helping them to deal with what they've been through. Child abuse does not just affect the child, it affects the entire family. There's lots of, I think, complex reactions when a parent goes through this, as well as siblings. We work with all members of the family when that's necessary and available. And so helping that parent also to learn to deal with, the effects that they're having is going to help that child.
And Bridget, from your perspective, can you tell a difference between the children that go ahead and go through the therapeutic process and those that don't?
Oh, absolutely.
And can you just talk a little bit about that for me?
Probably the most specific example of that is actually when in a child, for example, a child sexual abuse case, when a child has received years of therapy and they're able to cope with that, able to successfully complete the prosecution of those cases and accomplish that, which is a wonderful thing for them. And in addition, they're able to help maintain just a healthy, normal lifehood or normal life after that. So.
And go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to add, just thinking about what Bridget said there, when a child is actually able to have the opportunity for and experience what it's like to have the successful prosecution of that perpetrator in their life, what type of closure that provides for them. And again, for us to be able to be involved in that process and all the professionals in these fields working together for that.
And really, I think you hit on the most critical aspect. If I could convey anything, any one thing to the viewer, it's that we as the center taking on the Child Advocacy Center designation basically provides to McCracken County a central location that children that have been wounded or hurt or abused in any in any way can come and receive the therapeutic and the clinical intervention that they need, but they also then have an immediate, easy access to the other agencies that are going to be a part of that process, and then the family is supported through that entire journey. And I think that is an amazing, gift that the state has given us, but then we're able to turn around and let McCracken County know we're here, we have quality services. Don't be afraid of us, don't be afraid of DCBS, don't be afraid of law enforcement. We're here to keep the child healthy and safe. Any closing thoughts, because you're going to leave us in the second half, we're going to bring on another guest. Bridget, is there anything that you would like to say to the viewer before we take a break, just about your agency and about this new title that we now carry?
It's exciting for our agency to work with a new partner and to develop new relationships in the mission of helping children. And it's very exciting to have that, and we're glad to have you all and to work with you all.
Well, thank you. We're glad to be here as well.
I would just like to say thanks to Bridget and the rest of her staff, because I really do believe that we're in the position we are in now because of the relationship that we've been building with them over the last several years, and building that strong relationship and working together and trying to provide the services for these children and their families.
And they have excellent services and quality people there working on behalf of families in this area. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us for this first half of Rays of Hope. Please don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to talk to a parent of a former client of the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center who will be able to speak from her heart about the things that she felt and the journey that she walked when they chose to get support at the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. You will not want to miss it, so please don't go away. Hello and welcome back to the Rays of Hope program brought to you by the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. Today we've been talking about a change at our center, and that's that we've taken on the designation of the region's Child Advocacy Center, where we act in a very specific way on behalf of children. But today we have a very special guest with us, Mindy Sanderson. I'd like to welcome you, and of course Lori Brown has stayed for this segment as well. And you are the parent of a former client of our center, and so we have brought you, and you've graciously agreed to come on today and just talk to parents about your experience. And in the break, while we were preparing for this segment, one of the things that Lori said is that you have walked through every parent's worst nightmare, and as a result, you have a lot to share with us today. So first of all, thank you for being here. Just tell the viewer how you came to know the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. What was that like for you?
We came to the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center after we had reported her abuse. She came to me one evening and broke down. So we went to the police department, and they sent us to DCVS, which in turn sent us to you guys. And that was probably the turning point of her recovery, because I know that in telling, that was probably the first step in the process of her healing. But it didn't take me long to realize that that was probably the easy part. The hard part came later when she started to talk about emotions and things that she had tucked away that she hadn't dealt with. So at that point, Lori was able to help her to identify those emotions and to find ways of coping with those. So if she was having a bad day or a bad moment or just was in a tough situation, she could first identify the emotion, then identify the trigger, what triggered that emotion, and then find positive ways of coping with that.
Right.
And so, Lori, you worked with her daughter.
Right. When a child goes through trauma, in order to cope with, typically it's ongoing trauma, the coping skills that they use at the time are very helpful in helping them get through that situation. But after the situation is over, they actually can be very detrimental. And so first learning, what we work with is first learning to help that child recognize what those maladaptive ways of coping are. Learning them to, like Mindy said, to become aware of their emotions and their thoughts and their behaviors and how those things are connected, and how they can learn to regulate those things and work on what they're thinking, and then of course make better choices.
So, Mindy, talk to the viewer about what was that like for you as a parent when that first disclosure took place? What happened inside of you?
It was horrifying, because what was my worst fear was her reality for all these years. And to wake up and to decide that that's what that was just terrible. I look back at my life and realized that the years I had known were a lie. Nothing I knew about my family was exactly true. So to try to handle that was probably the hardest for me. In turn, in trying to get her help and get her where she needed to be in treatment and that kind of thing was
It was obviously very difficult.
Yeah, very difficult. But it was just tough in general to try to bring your family together, because I have another son, and he was going through emotions with his father being taken from the home. So I was dealing with her and her trauma, and him and what he was going through, and so we're all trying to going through all these different emotions, trying to figure out exactly where we were and where we fit.
And if you were going to talk to a parent that might be watching that maybe suspects that something's going on, what would you say to them?
I just tell them to believe your child. look for signs and symptoms, read on child abuse and symptoms that occur with that. And I don't think sometimes that there's a way that you can tell, because these perpetrators are very, very good at what they do. And there are times, and there are things now that looking back, that I see and I think that should have been a red flag, but it wasn't, because you're not looking for those signs and symptoms and
I think
things.
you hit an excellent point, that parents may feel that they should know or should be able to tell, but that's part of the process that's going on. Lori, would you like to speak to that?
Right, it is, and I think so often for a non-defending parent, that's one of the things that they struggle with, is guilt over not recognizing and not knowing. But just as Mindy and I have talked about, as well as many other parents of children who find themselves in these situations, is that the perpetrators are very skilled and they're very good at manipulating. And many of the signs and symptoms that children have when kind of isolated, after the fact it may be easier to go back and tell, but when they're isolated, they may look just like normal things. You know, kids may be having some social problems, and that's very normal for kids going through different stages of development. And sometimes they may experience particular, medical problems, headaches and things like that may be related to, to other things as well. And so sometimes it's not until after the fact, till that disclosure is made, that you can start tying those things together to get a better picture of what's actually going on, where that's coming from.
That's right.
And so you may be talking to parents today that don't suspect anything, or you may be talking to parents today that their child has just come and said something to them. What would you share? What thoughts of encouragement would you share with them in that moment that maybe they've experienced just recently, just like you did, when their child comes and says, "This has happened to me"?
Believe your child. Believe exactly what they tell you, because you have time later. If it's not exactly so, you have time to go through that. But most time that you talk to someone that has been through this, and I've had a lot of people approach me since they know of our situation, and they want to tell. And people, I've had 2 or 3 little girls to come to me and say, "This has been happening to me." And I've had a few that has said their mother does not believe, or they're trying to push everything under the carpet, but you can't do that. You can't do that for your child. And it's very, very important for their upbringing, for what they're going to be and who they're going to become later on.
For their recovery, like you're talking about. So
I would add one thing to that, Mary, is ask your child if you have a suspicion, or a thought, or even if not, this is something that parents need to talk to their children about. And I think it's such a taboo issue in our society. Sometimes waiting for a child to come to you can take a very long time, because a child who's being abused doesn't think they have permission to tell. So ask your child, talk to them about what's going on. If you notice, have a concern about something, do approach them and give them permission to start.
Exactly.
And give us an
conversation.
example of what that might look like. How would a parent talk to a child in this situation?
Well, I think when you start with your children when they're very young, educating them and talking to them, sometimes what we educate our children on is about strangers. So often that's what we hear. But I think it's really important to talk to your children about anyone, and teaching them about their boundaries and their rights, and being able to be comfortable, even when it's with family members. Refusing hugs and just simple things like that. Sometimes that we think, out of good manners, to thinking that kids have to do that. So teaching them about, their rights and responsibilities as far as their own bodies, and when they're not comfortable, and encourage them to talk about when they're not comfortable. But if a parent actually suspects, I do think talking directly to your child. And again, given the situation, some kids may or may not be comfortable, but at least you're opening that door to let them know that it's okay.
And the time always goes by so fast on this program, I think, and we don't have a lot of time left. But I would just like, tell us, how is your daughter doing, and what was your journey like at the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center?
Our journey was incredible, and I could not have asked for any better treatment. I think the opening of the Expressive Arts Therapy Center was so important. I know that my misconception of therapy was that we would come in, there would be a sterile couch and a therapist with a notepad, but that's not how it was. I mean, there were different ways that she could express herself, sand trays, painting, clay, yoga, different things like that. And not only did it help her express herself, but she could identify with other victims because of their artwork that was placed there.
I see. So she felt like she was a part of a
Yes.
greater, greater picture, perhaps.
Exactly.
And so, how is she doing now?
She's doing fine. She's has her moments,
Sure.
and there are still days that she has to work with her triggers and that kind of thing. And I think therapy probably is ongoing. I think that you can come to a place where, okay, it's all right to slow down for a while, but there are always going to be things with them that's going to bring triggers or be able to bring back memories of what's happened. So I think if you can consider therapy ongoing, that's.
And do you feel like you were taught how to be that ongoing therapeutic agent in her life?
Yes. That was another thing that I was going to tell you. I think that we brought family into it, and I did sessions with Bree, and we all did sessions as a family, so that it brought us together as a unit, and we were able to deal with what was going on and everybody's emotion and that kind of thing.
When a child goes through trauma, it's something that's going to affect them for the rest of their life. It's something that's going to affect a family for the rest of their life, in the time that they spend together. We don't want a child to be in therapy forever, but again, we want the parent to become that therapeutic agent and for them to learn how to recognize and manage the effects much more effectively. Right.
I cannot thank you both enough for being here today. And in closing, are there any thoughts, anything you'd like to tell viewers that may be identifying with what you're saying? You have just a few moments with them. What would you say to parents that are watching or family members that are watching you today?
I would say love your child and love them in the best way possible, and as much as you know, in as good a way as you know how. And keep communication open, because that is the key. That is the key to your relationship with your family, or your key to your relationship with anybody. Just love your child.
Thank you very much for being here and for the courage that you have displayed and that your family has displayed. You have certainly been a gift to our center, and so thank you so much for being here. Lori, we have a brief amount of time. Any closing thoughts after working with this family that you would like to say to the viewer?
I would just like to say that if someone, again, either suspects or is in this situation, that there is help available. Our center is here to help. And I know, like with Mindy and for her family, she and they have truly been an inspiration, I think, to other families who were maybe afraid to come forward. And I think in seeing what they've been able to do through this healing process, that it has inspired others to come forward. And even though it's a very difficult thing to do, there is help. Again, help available, and it can make an enormous difference.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. Lori Brown, Director of Clinical Services, Mindy Sanderson, thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us your time again today to learn about what we do and to learn how you can be a part of the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. We're going to leave you with some phone numbers. Should you need our assistance, please feel free to call. We would love to help you in any way that we possibly can. So until next time, continue to educate yourself and continue to believe the victim. Thank you for joining us.